Hi everyone. Oh, Pico just like ran off the couch. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. As you can see from the title of this video, I want to give you my 5 top tips on whether or not you should postpone your wedding. This video is actually inspired by one of my friends who asked me how I felt about our small ceremony. If you don't know, you probably don't because I haven't said it on my YouTube channel. My husband now and I got married on June 14th. And obviously because of everything going on, we weren't able to have the wedding that we had planned, but we did end up having just a very small ceremony. We had 14 guests, and then we had our pastor, and we had vendors like a photographer, a videographer. We had a florist come, but then the florist left, and then the main woman at the venue. I think our guest list was originally, including children, around 175 people. Keeping in mind we weren't expecting everyone to come. I think usually they say like around 70 to 80% of guests come. So yeah, if I had to guess, our wedding was originally going to be about 150 people, and we brought it down to 14 because of everything going on. I think this video is going to be helpful now because, and you can let me know if not, people that had weddings planned in March, April, and probably even May, there wasn't really a lot of back and forth. It was pretty much just clearly, especially for March and April, like we have to cancel. I think even at that point it wouldn't be appropriate to even have a wedding with 14 people like we did. By May maybe it would have been appropriate, even like 5 people would have been appropriate. Luckily enough, by the time that we were getting married, I think it was, well obviously I think it was, but it ended up being okay to just have a very small ceremony. Going forward until probably the end of the year, if not longer, I think a lot of people are still going to be struggling with this, whether or not they should postpone their wedding altogether, hold a smaller ceremony like we did, etc, etc. I've already been talking for almost 3 minutes, so I'm just gonna get into my tips. My first tip is you should decide first and foremost what's most important to you. Do you more so really just want to get married, or is having a big wedding, quote unquote traditional wedding, really important to you? Here's Shiloh just coming along. And I'm not saying that to judge anyone that does decide that having a big traditional wedding is important to them, or I want to, more important is harsh, but if I'm being real, like I think some people, to be honest, a lot of what's important to them about getting married is having that big wedding. And I can understand if that's something that you've been picturing and planning since you were a young child. Really making that decision is going to make it a lot easier to decide whether or not you should postpone your wedding or have a smaller ceremony. For Corey and I, my husband, what was more important to us was to get married on our original date. We had planned, I think now since maybe November of last year, to get married on June 14th of 2020. We particularly like that date because 6 for the month of June plus 14 equals 20. So we thought that was fun. It would be easy for Corey to actually remember our anniversary. And so yeah, getting married on that date that we had planned was important to us. And at the end of the day, neither Corey or I, it wasn't super important for us to have a huge wedding. I feel like it's more typical for women when they're younger to picture having like this huge dream wedding. I myself was never really like that. I definitely was excited to get married. A group of my friends, we actually, I want to say when we were still in high school, we like wrote down who we thought would get married first. So like, yes, getting married was definitely important to me, but I was never someone that like fantasized about their wedding day. I'm more so, I want to fantasize sounds weird, but I'm more so, since I was younger, has always been more so focused on having children than focused on having a wedding day. And then for Corey, I just think most men aren't as into big weddings. What was most important for him was to just be able to celebrate with his family and friends. And then especially because we live in Virginia and most of Corey's family and friends live in Michigan or elsewhere, having an event that would bring everyone together was important to him, but not more than getting married. That was kind of what set us off, and from there it was really easy to make that decision of having our ceremony but extremely downsizing. The second question kind of going along with that, I think that you and your partner should speak about is whether or not you can have like an actual big celebration, traditional wedding later. So even though Corey and I did get married on June 14th with our smaller ceremony, we are planning on having like a bigger reception with all of our family and friends next year. The reason we're doing that primarily, I think, is just kind of, if you think about it, weddings really aren't for the couple. The marriage is for the couple, but the wedding is for your family and friends. As I said, because Corey's family and friends aren't in the area. We don't see them as often. So having something to kind of bring everyone together would be fun. So we did decide to have that next year. We're going to kind of have it as a 1-year anniversary party. The third question I think you and your partner should ask yourselves and speak about is a financial question. Will you lose money? And that's including your honeymoon if you've already planned and spent money on your honeymoon. And then do you have other things that that money could be put towards? So for us, starting with our honeymoon, so we did postpone our honeymoon. Well, yeah, so we didn't take a honeymoon this year. We just both took a week off of work and we had quote unquote a staycation. But next year we do plan on taking a honeymoon after our wedding. That was probably one of the things that was the most difficult for Corey and I, because we're both big believers on when you get married, you should take your honeymoon right after. Otherwise, I don't know. I feel like life can interfere. It looks a little bit more weird to take that much time off of work. It's not as expected. So that was a little bit harder for us. I think you and your partner need to decide if having a honeymoon is really important to you. Corey and I, we had actually not paid for anything for our honeymoon yet. We hadn't booked our flights, which I understand a lot of people were able to get reimbursed for their flight or push back their flight for a later time. We didn't book any hotels or Airbnbs or anything, which I know is the most difficult part of getting your money back with everything going on. Like, we really didn't put anything into our honeymoon yet, because at the time that coronavirus started to get pretty serious here in the United States, it was March and our wedding was not until June. So like we were kind of starting to get up into like getting ready to booking everything, because we were at that 3-month mark. And I mean, everything happens for a reason. I felt like we were running behind, like why have we not booked anything? But God knew coronavirus is going to come along, and so maybe for whatever reason he made us hold off on booking the honeymoon stuff, so we didn't end up losing money. Going more towards the wedding part, I think a lot of vendors, because of how crazy everything going on is, have been very, very lenient and very, very nice. But there are going to be some contracts that you're not going to be able to get out of, rightfully so. It's mean. It's definitely mean if someone doesn't let you out of a contract, but they don't really have an obligation to, even with everything going on. You have to think about it from their point of view. They're expecting a certain amount of money to come in the same way you're expecting to have your wedding. So you can't really hold it against them for not just reimbursing you totally and getting rid of the contract. So kind of keep that in mind if you've already put a lot into your wedding and you know that at the end of the day you're going to lose $10,000 between your honeymoon and your wedding, the things that you can't get back. Maybe that might be a reason to go ahead and go forward with everything as normally as you can, just to not lose that much money, because that's a lot of money. A fair amount of our vendors were quite flexible. So because we are having a celebration next year, a lot of our vendors allowed us to use some of what we are going to do next year for this year and then postpone. I don't know how to explain it. So I guess what ended up being the most valuable for us was our venue, which I was actually the most worried about, because that's where most of the cost goes into. Our venue actually allowed us to use the ceremony site basically for free, because we didn't have to pay any extra and we're using it next year. So that was very, very nice of them. Made, again, our decision quite easy to not have to put any more money into it. Another thing is that because we had our ceremony and we had a florist come and decorate like the arch that we got married underneath, I probably wouldn't have them do that next year, and that's something like easily you would save money on. It is also nice that that's still a year out, so that gives us another year to save up, which kind of goes with my fourth tip, and that is, will you have to postpone other life plans if you postpone your wedding? This was something that again was important to me and Corey. We knew, so I guess I'll backtrack. I know some people that have children before getting married. I do not judge anyone like that. I myself always, I don't want to say always, but like I myself thought that I would never be someone to care about being married first. But then the more I thought about it, and especially after going through premarital counseling through our church, it did end up being something that I wanted to make sure we were married first before we decided to try to have children. And it just ended up being something that was important to me. Again, I don't judge anyone that has kids before they get married. Really, what's Shiloh brought her little toy. She likes to be fetch with one of my little elastic things, so she brought it over because that's what she does when she wants to play. But yeah, it ended up being something that like I wanted to make sure we were married first. I know so many people, I don't know so many people. You didn't even bring it back, Bushaboo. Oh, you did. You're distracting mommy. But yeah, I think what's most important is to have that commitment to each other. For example, Corey and I have known we are going to get married for at least 4 years. Very early on in our relationship, we had already made that commitment to each other, and it made our relationship actually a lot easier, because when hard times came around, as hard times always do, neither of us kind of saw it as like, oh, well, that's fine, we'll move on. We had already made that commitment to each other, so we worked through those issues. And I think it's made it easier now over 5.5 years later to kind of continue in our relationship, because we both know at the end of the day we've made that commitment to each other. We knew that if we postponed our wedding by a year, that would postpone us having children. Another thing that you might think of, do you have plans to, this was supposed to kind of go within tip 3, but I guess tip 3 and 4 are kind of meshing. But yeah, so for example, let's say you have plans to buy a house or you have plans to buy a new car. Keep in mind that if you have just like a smaller ceremony, you might be able to use that money towards other things. And the last tip that I'll give, if you were to have a quote unquote traditional wedding with, I would say, anything over 20 guests, be prepared for people to be wearing masks, and you have to be okay with that. The reason I wanted a photographer and the reason I wanted a videographer is because I wanted to remember our wedding and remember it as a very joyful, happy day, and be able to one day look at that content with my children, because I wasn't able to do that with my parents. And I was really excited for that moment one day in the future, God willing, because we don't know if that future will ever come. But having masks in the photos or in the videos, I knew whenever that time came that I was looking back at it would make me sad and would just make me remember how terrible of a time this is. I don't think anyone's gonna forget. It's not gonna just like wipe from our minds, but it wasn't something that I wanted at the top of my mind when getting married. So technically at the time, I'm sorry if you can hear Pico and Child, they're fighting in the background. Technically, at the time that we got married in Virginia, we were allowed up to 50 guests. So we could have had up to 50 people there. But I knew at that point, 1, people would want to wear masks. 2, I would want people to wear masks for their own safety. So for me, it was more beneficial. What are you doing? So for me, having just, again, that smaller, intimate, we really just had the people closest to us there, and I knew that that alone would be special versus having 50 of our guests there. Obviously, it would have been great because there's so many people I wish could have been there. So those are my 5 tips. I've been recording for almost 20 minutes, so I'm gonna go ahead and end the video here. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna apologize. Something, if you're a woman, especially watching this, women apologize way too much, that when we shouldn't be apologizing, like you could just speak. Disproportionately, women apologize more. So that's a little tip to you if you catch yourself saying I'm sorry when you don't really need to be. So I'm gonna backtrack. If any of these tips were unclear to you, just ask me in the comments down below. I'd be happy to answer. I'm not sorry if they're unclear, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have if they're unclear. After that little rant, I'll go ahead and close the video now. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed hanging out with me. Bye.